Hey guys, Matt here, and in this video we're going to be going through a very highly rated game for learning Japanese with Ni No Kuni. So in this video we're going to go through the beginning of the game. I'm actually going to be summarizing the very beginning of the game, so there's no spoilers or anything, as there is a little bit of emotional scenes that happen. So if you haven't played Ni No Kuni, don't worry, I'll skip through any of those kind of important bits that we don't want to spoil. And we're going to go right into the actual gameplay, so really have a look at what this game is like to play and some of the really amazing things for a Japanese language learner that make Ni No Kuni almost one of the very best games for learning Japanese with. However, there are a few things that you need to be aware of that can make this game quite difficult as well, so it's quite a mixed bag. So let's go through the game together. I will be breaking down every single sentence that we come across so that you can learn Japanese no matter what level you are. So this is kind of like a guided immersion, so that you can kind of learn Japanese in just a more fun, relaxed environment. So it's not necessarily, you must remember this 100% of the time right away, but more focusing on learning language over time. As you're exposed to the language, you slowly build an understanding of how it's being used. Well, this video series is aimed to help you develop those skills. Now, this is actually a continuation of the Vocab series that you may have already seen. However, you don't have to watch any episode in order. But if you did, if you watched all of the videos in this playlist, we actually have a spreadsheet of all of the language that we've covered throughout every single video in this playlist. And we can see here that already we have covered 42% of the JLPT N5, 38% of the N4, 26% of the N3, and then about 7% of both the N2 and the N1, giving us a total of 16% of the JLPT already covered with 2,278 words, with an additional 1,000 words that we've covered in these games that do not exist in the JLPT, which is really interesting because we can see that actually about half of the language that you come across when you're playing video games do not exist in the JLPT, which means that even if you've completely mastered the N1, this video series will be teaching you about 50% of new language with every single sentence that we come across. But don't let that scare you if you're a complete beginner, because we're going to be breaking down absolutely everything so that you understand no matter what. If you want to check out this spreadsheet, then feel free to check it out in the description. It's quite interesting to see which games actually have more of which level language. For example, we can see here that Triangle Strategy has quite a lot of N1 pieces of language. It's got 23. That's almost the most out of any other game, with The Legend of Zelda actually being the highest in this regard. Whereas games like Crayon Shin-chan we can see have 55 N5 pieces of language, which makes that a very approachable game for beginners. However, today we're going to be checking out Ni No Kuni, a really cool game for learning Japanese with. So without further ado, let's get into it. So one really cool thing about this game is just how accessible it is, thanks to the fact that it has furigana almost everywhere in the entire game. And this really does make it incredibly accessible no matter what level Japanese you are, because you don't need to know any of the kanji in order to be able to actually approach this game. Most games you have this barrier that's really difficult to overcome. When you see this wall of kanji that you don't know, it really lowers your motivation to keep going through it, because you know how difficult it is. You're going to have to whether write the stroke order or find the kanji some other way. It can really be very demotivating when you just see a huge wall of kanji that you don't know. And so having furigana makes it so much more accessible for you. Now, it's not a perfect game to learn Japanese with. There are certainly positives and negatives. The positives are that it's probably one of the best fantasy games to get you into the genre. So if you're interested in things like Pokemon, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, the kind of fantasy setting with magic and swords and monsters, then it really is one of the most accessible games thanks to having that furigana. However, there are definitely some downsides that you'll see in this video, such as, for example, this damn little yellow-blue guy, Shizuku. He's quite a challenge for many people, no matter what level you are. And that's because of the certain dialect that he speaks in, which we'll learn a bit of in this video. Actually, before we get started, there's another thing that I really like about this game, and just even, for example, right here where we have a look at the menu, right? As you're navigating the menu, you can actually use the furigana to your advantage, and you can read even just like setting options, right? Now, that's not the most exciting piece of language, but it's really important and useful language for you to learn, and normally you cannot access this language very easily. Like, for example, look at the first word there, naido, for difficulty. That kanji, the first one, that's a challenging kanji to write. How many stroke orders that has? If you don't have some sort of special tool to help you quickly find what that kanji is, that is going to be a nightmare to look up. But thanks to the fact that you have furigana, it is instantly you can see the answer that you're looking for. All you have to do is just write in naido into a dictionary and you've finished. So this can be a really good first game, even just to help you with things like game menus and things like that. Because normally game menus don't have furigana in the actual settings and stuff, so it can be a good game to help introduce you to that as well. In fact, some of my favorite things about this game come from the menu. For example, even here in the loading menu, you can see, just look how crisp and easy to read, easy to look at, how nice it looks, right? You have the furigana, the right size text, the text isn't too difficult to read, it just looks nice. It feels good to look at. My eyes feel comfortable, right, looking at this Japanese. This is a very comfortable game for looking at Japanese, and that's definitely one thing that this game's got going for it. However, there are negatives, which we'll find out in this video. Now, just before we get started in the second world, I'd like to just have a quick look at how the dialogue is handled in this game. Now, as you may have noticed already, there's a lot of cutscenes, and unfortunately, those cutscenes, you can't actually take at your own pace. Well, you can, but it's very annoying. In order to take the game's cutscenes at your own pace, you need to press the pause button. Now, luckily, it is a transparent pause button, a pause window, so you can see the text and you can read the furigana and everything. But it is annoying, even today in this video. Sometimes I want to break down a sentence and I didn't press pause in the right timing, and then I'm like, oh, I can't break it down, and it gets a little bit annoying. So for the cutscenes, it's quite difficult, and I would recommend maybe recording it or something. However, all of the other language in this game, you can actually take at your own pace, push to continue, dialogue boxes, and most of that isn't voice acted, but it all has furigana, so it's very, very accessible. And there is a lot of dialogue in this game to read, a huge variety of dialogue, and it's all very, very easy to read. So this game is more focusing on just the dialogue that is everywhere. In a way, it's almost like a novel, right, where there's lots and lots of reading. But it's very accessible thanks to having furigana, which most novels don't have. Another thing that's really cool, for example, is right here at the top left, you can actually see the objective that we're currently after, and that language right there constantly reminds us of where we need to go, which is really nice because, you know, it's very clear and it's a very relatable piece of language. It's the current thing you're doing. So every time you're doing something in this game, you actually have a kind of theme of language that you can look at and kind of remind you of what you're doing. So it gives importance, it gives kind of reason for this language. And that's a really, really important thing. Oh man, and just look at the graphics. Like, the graphics are just so good. Like, I remember when this game first came out on the PS3. Well, came out on the DS and then PS3, but when I first played it, it was on the PS3. And I was so blown away by the graphics. I was like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen on the PlayStation 3. And it's, you know, very cartoony graphics, but the fact that it has this kind of Studio Ghibli style art style, but then it's like video game, and then it's like you can actually interact with it in a 3D environment. It's so beautiful. And now with the HD remasters, it's just incredible. It really is a beautiful world to explore, and it's always so exciting, like going to the next area and seeing what kind of thing you come across, because the game has such a huge variety of different environments that you come across, like, you know, even deserts and water places and ice places and lava places and just forests, all kinds of crazy things, beaches and pirate ships, and it's so varied and fun. It's just this huge big adventure, this beautiful adventure with wonderful music and furigana all along the journey to help you with your Japanese studies. So, okay, so for example here, the young boy says, Shizuku, mate yo. So, Shizuku is the name of the little guy, the little yellow-blue guy here, and he is going to be your worst enemy. Not to kind of start off with any kind of negativity, but he is very difficult. He speaks in an Osakan dialect, which is from Osaka, and he is very, very thick in the language that he uses that has come from this Kansai region. And this makes it quite challenging for learners, especially beginners, to come across his language, or really anyone who's not super familiar with the Kansai dialect. Even I, for example, sometimes I live in the Kansai region. Sometimes I see something, I'm like, wait a second, what's that? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So it is a little bit tricky. Here, for example, though, Oliver is speaking in standard Japanese, and he says, Shizuku, mate yo. So Shizuku, wait. Matsu is to wait, and then yo just adds emphasis to the sentence.
Shizuku, mate yo.
もうすぐゴロネール王国や。
もうすぐゴロネル王国や. So, もうすぐ means very soon, after just a little bit more. Goroneru is the name of this okoku. Okoku here means a kingdom. Actually, o means king, and then koku is like a country. So the country of the king, the kingdom. And this last little bit here, the ya, this is the Kansai dialect that I was talking about. So, ya in Kansai region is actually da in standard Japanese, to be, right? Da. So when you say, for example, okoku da, so this means that you're kind of exclaiming, you're teaching someone that it is the kingdom, okoku da. Well, here in the Kansai dialect, you would say okoku ya. So the da turns into a ya in this dialect.
もうすぐゴロネール王国や。お？
どうしよう。
逃げるで。
Nigeru there. So this is interesting. Another really useful piece of Osaka dialect here. Nigeru is just to run, but the de here. So this is tough, right? A beginner might be like, what? Why is there a de particle at the end of a normal verb? The de here is actually yo in standard Japanese. So we actually just saw Oliver say, mate yo, so wait, right? The yo adds emphasis. Well, in the Kansai dialect, or here the Osakan dialect, de does the exact same thing. So it's quite interesting. So for example, the nigeru de is exactly the same as nigeru yo, right? Run! You can actually, for example, put these two pieces of language together. So you may be familiar with the expression dayo, right? If you put it at the end, for example, maybe you're trying to be very emphatic, teaching someone something like, Osaka dayo, it's Osaka. Well, you could say in the Osakan dialect, Osaka yade, so the dayo turns into yade. So that's actually a combination of the two pieces of Kansai dialect that we just learned.
どうしよう。
逃げるで。ほな行くでオリバー。
Hona ikude oriba. So hona is actually the Kansai dialect version of saying ja or dewa, well then, or come now. So ja, ikuyo, hona ikude, the same thing, just one of them standard dialect and the other one's Kansai ben. So remember the de here is yo in the Kansai dialect. So hona ikude, ja ikuyo oriba.
ほな行くでオリバー。
待ってよ。これが二の国。
So kore ga Ni No Kuni. So kore means this, and then ga is the one that is, and then Ni No Kuni is the name of this world, and also the name of this game. It actually means kind of like second country or second world. Ni means two, no is the possessive particle, and then kuni is for country. So it's kind of like the country of two, the world of two, right? The second world, right? Ni No Kuni.
これが二の国。
せや、
Oh my god, and then we have some more Kansai dialect just down there. Oh, very tricky. This is definitely the trickiest part of this game, and so just be careful. If you at all find it really frustrating when you see this guy talk, a big tip is to just ignore whenever Shizuku talks. It can be quite challenging. But the rest of the game is incredible for a Japanese language learner. It's just Shizuku is tough. So here, Shizuku says, Seiya. Any guess what that means? Seiya, well, we know that the ya is the same as da, right, in the Kansai dialect. This se is actually so. So, so desu ne, that so here is se in the Osakan dialect. So, seiya in standard Japanese is soda. That's right. Seiya, soda, same meaning.
せや、お前らの世界とは違うもう一つの世界や。
And then he says, お前らの世界とは違うもう一つの世界や。So, お前ら is you guys, no sekai, sekai is the world. So, your world, お前らの世界とは, so kind of, as for kind of defining this place, as for with your world, 違う, it is different. So this is different from your world. もう一つ means one more. No is the possessive particle. Sekai, we already know is world. And then ya means da. So, もう一つの世界だ。もう一つの世界や。So it is, right, this da, this ya, is kind of teaching something. It's really being strong, stating a fact. So this is a different world from the world that you guys are from. This is kind of another world. もう一つの世界。
お前らの世界とは違うもう一つの世界や。
Okay, so in this video, what I would like to do is, instead of going through the whole introduction scene, which is hours and hours, and it's very long, and there's lots of dialogue, that's something that you guys can do, because actually there's some really important story elements that happen that I don't want to spoil for anyone, and they are a little bit heavy, a little bit emotional, and so I'd rather not spoil any of that for you guys. So instead, I'd rather look at why this game is so good, and actually more get started when the game actually begins, when you enter the Ni No Kuni world. So just very quickly, just a kind of story summary of what's going on. The story is set around this boy, Oliver, and he lives in this kind of very nice, peaceful world, very beautiful, lovely little almost 1930s type world, and something very bad happens, traumatic thing happens, and that causes him to kind of get very upset, and somehow, magically, he actually brings his stuffed toy to life. And that's that very annoying guy that I was telling you about before, Shizuku, the blue and yellow guy. This guy, Shizuku, gets magically brought to life, and for some particular reason, you guys decide to go to his world, this kind of magical second world, Ni No Kuni, the second world, in order to fix the problems that happen in your world. So that's a pretty vague, spoiler-free events of what happened. I highly recommend, if you're interested though, you should definitely check this game out. I think it's actually like 80% off on Steam right now, the sale, although, you know, this video is not always going to be true, but just right now when this video is released, I think it is on sale, so yay, congratulations people who are seeing this video early. But the game does go on sale quite often. And this game is a really excellent game, even at full price, to buy, to learn Japanese with. It's very, very good, even with its negatives. And here we have one of the absolutely incredible things for helping you learn Japanese with, Magic Master. Now, this is actually the book in the 3DS version, the actual original release of this game. There was actually a book that was released alongside the 3DS game that had all of the kind of spells that you needed to hand write in, with description of monsters and bestiaries and items and everything. And this is completely accessible. As you play the game, you'll unlock pages of this actual book. You can zoom in, zoom out. It's incredibly accessible. This is what I wish Pokedexes were like in Pokemon games. This is a billion times better than any Pokedex could ever be in a Pokemon game. I really hope that one day Pokedexes can get as good as this book is for helping you learn Japanese with. So just very quickly, if I showcase just how awesome this book is. So as you can see, right, there's all these different sections of the book, right? We have the spells, weapons, monsters, the maps and things, and you can actually just read all of that. This is how much we've already unlocked just at this stage of the game, but as we progress through the game, we'll unlock more and more, like for example with the bestiary. But already there is a ton of reading that you could do just having a look. For example, if we start at the very beginning, here is actually the book itself that was actually released in the real world, and you can skip through it and you can read through it and you can zoom in as much as you want and read that kanji, so it makes it incredibly accessible. And you know, there's the whole game introduction, which you can't read because it's not even in Japanese. But even the titles here, they're all in Japanese with furigana attached, so you can read the indexes and everything. And look at the artwork. Like, that reminds me of like when I was a kid, there were these famous books that they're long gone in my memory. I can't even remember them, but there were these really cool like old books that you could like flip upside down and like see a face, and then there's another face in someone's beard or something. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. If you do, please leave a comment in the section below. I'd love to see, you know, what that actually book is. I completely forgot what those books were. Something from my childhood. It's like a repressed memory or something, but it reminds me of that, right? The art style is very similar, this kind of very human art style. And so, as you can see, there's descriptions of absolutely everything, right? There's even a description of the book that we're reading right now. Magic Master, Honsho no Koto. Honsho means this book, no Koto means about. So this is this book, right? Maho tsukai o mezasu mono no tame no kihon no sho. So Maho tsukai is kind of a magician. Maho is magic. Tsukai is using, so someone who uses magic. Or mezasu mono. Mezasu is to aim for something, to try and be something. Mono is a person or an individual. So a person who aims, mezasu mono, to become a maho tsukai. And we can see that because of this o particle. Maho tsukai o mezasu mono. This shows the object of the sentence, what the people are trying to become. No tame no. So tame here means for the sake of, and it's a kihon no sho. Kihon is basics and then sho is a book. So a book of basics for the sake of people who want to become magicians. Maho tsukai. And it has absolutely everything you need to become a magician in both the game and in Japanese. There's so much you can learn with this game right here. Like, this is better than even a novel sometimes, because of the fact that it has the furigana. Not many novels that you read will actually have furigana, as well as language that has a sense of importance and even, you know, worth for you to even be kind of reading in the first place, because it directly relates to the game that you're playing. So it really has this kind of sense of, you know, importance that you're reading. It's like, oh, this is actually there's a point for reading this, and there's something that I can relate to the game because of it. For example, you know, here's the spell for gate, something that we're going to do very, very soon, and you can read all about it if you want. You can learn about that in Japanese, and you know, there's more and more spells as you unlock in the game. But there's the same thing with even monsters, right? So if we just quickly go to the monster section, which I believe is here. So you can like navigate through the menus, but you could even just zoom into sections of the book and it will actually transition into that section. It's so cool. So here we have one of the little friends we make somewhere along the way, and this is actually the first friend we make. And look how cool there is. There's a little like even animation for him and a description of him. It's way better than a Pokedex. And this works for absolutely every character that you come across, as well as monster and all that kind of stuff. It's so cool. It even does it for weapons, right? We can see here Sobi Shinan. So you can zoom in and you can read descriptions of any weapon in the game that you come across. You will not get that in most games, or if any other game. I can't even think of a game that offers this amount of reading practice for almost everything relatable and everything, you know, important for the entire game. You know, you have monsters. We haven't seen any monsters yet. You've got maps of the world that you can actually read about, the areas and the history. There's just so much in this that is just ridiculously good. Just so cool. I love this kind of thing so much. It's pretty much like the one reason that I would recommend a Pokemon game is because of, you know, the Pokedexes and, you know, the simple language that's there. But this is way better way better than a Pokemon game because it has furigana that makes it so accessible, and then it also has all of this language that you can zoom in on. It's easy to read, it applies to what you're coming across. It's just so cool. Anyway, let's get back to the game. Okay, and now we're back to the intro, the cutscene that we saw at the very beginning of this video. Now we can finally get into the game. So sorry about that intro. It was kind of important to go through it very quickly. Okay, so we're back to the sentence, Hona ikude oriba. So a bit of review for you. Do you remember what this means? Hona means ja, or dewa. So well then. Ikude means iku is to go. And then de, this is a bit tricky. De is the same as yo. So, ja, iku yo. Let's go. Oriba.
Hona ikude oriba.
待ってよ。これが二の国。
This is Ni No Kuni.
ようやく見えてきたな。
Oh, and we have a new sentence. He says, Yoyaku miete kita na. So, yoyaku means finally, and then miete kita. So, mieru is to be able to see, and then the tekuru is to come to do something. So, miete kita means you've come to be able to see. So, you finally come to be able to see, Ni No Kuni, this second world, because they've been talking about it for a while now. They had to go through a whole bunch of trouble to get here.
ようやく見えてきたな。せやけどまだ距離あんな。
Oh, we have even more Kansai events. So here he says, Seyakedo, mada kyori anna. So, seyakedo. Actually, you may already be able to guess what this means. If you think about some of the language that we've already covered in this video. Seya. We saw that previously. Seya means soda. So, seyakedo is the same as sodakedo. So it is that case, however. Seyakedo, that's the case, however. Mada, still. Kyori here means a distance. And then anna is actually here slang for aru na. Aru here gets contracted into un. And aru means to exist. So there is a lot of distance. And then na is kind of more of like a masculine or even here a Kansai Ben way of saying ne. So, although, we're finally able to see it, we still have quite a long way to go.
せやけどまだ距離あんな。
でもさ、雫。
Demo sa shizuku. So demo, however, sa is an interesting piece of language that this is kind of, you're trying to get someone's attention, be assertive, right? So, however, look, right? In the same way where you might use, look to kind of get someone's attention, or hey, come on, or listen, right? So demo sa. However, hey, however, look, shizuku.
でもさ、雫。すごかったよね、さっきの。
すごかったよね、さっきの. So, sugoi means amazing. Sugokata is the past tense form, so it was amazing. Yone, it was, right? Sakino, so he's talking about what happened previously. Saki means previously, and then no is the possessive particle, so the thing that happened just a little while ago.
すごかったよね、さっきの。
ああ、イノシカの群れやな。
Ah, inoshika no mure ya na. So, is like yes. And this is interesting, inoshika. So, I believe this is actually a combination of two different animals. Inoshishi is a wild boar in Japanese, and shika is a deer. So, the inoshika is kind of like a boar deer, right? Like a pig deer. As you can see, they didn't look like a normal animal, right? So, this inoshika is these boar deers, no mure. Mure is actually like a herd, right? So as we saw, very Lion King stampede type thing, right? That is a mure, the stampede, the herd of lots and lots of inoshika. And then we have yana. Now, this is Kansai Ben. Ya is da. So, dana. Or perhaps if you wanted to speak a little bit more politely, desu ne. So, yeah, the herd of the inoshika, right? Inoshika no mure ya na.
ああ、イノシカの群れやな。あれこそ二の国の大自然や。
あれこそ、Ni No Kuni no daishisen ya. So, are koso actually means like for that precise reason, right? Are is like that. And then koso is adding emphasis to the thing. So, precisely that. Ni no Kuni no daishisen ya. Ni no Kuni, the second world. Dai means grand or great, and then shizen is nature. So the grand nature, the very large, the open, the huge nature of the second world, Ni No Kuni. Ya is da. So that for sure is the great nature of Ni No Kuni.
あれこそ二の国の大自然や。で、感動したよ。
Oh my god, it's really difficult. Doya, kando shita yaro. So, doya, any idea what that means? So let's just, for example, let's just have a look on the internet and just how would we actually come across Kansai Ben when you don't know what it means and you don't have me here to tell you what it does mean. So it's quite difficult, right? Because what you would need to do is you would need to go into a dictionary, for example, and type in doya. So for example, I use kanshudo.com. I quite like it a lot. It's really nice because it has rankings of all the words that you come across. But if we have a look, doya doesn't come up with anything because it's very much a kind of specialized, a dialect language. What about if we use here tenten? Tenten's quite nice. It's simply hover over a word and you can instantly see the meaning. But even tenten doesn't give you the answer. And this is a really challenging thing about dialects. None of the kind of standard learning tools will actually give you what you're looking for when you're trying to find this kind of rarer dialectal language. So what you would need to do, one trick that I like doing, is just very simply going to Google, typing in the Kansai Ben or typing in the dialect or whatever piece of language you can't find, and just writing imi at the end. Right? So for example, here we just wrote doya imi. Well, if we did this, we would see that it means, here, an in, and there's other kinds of piece of language, but it's a little bit, unclear, right? It's not exactly what we're looking for. So because I know that it's Kansai Ben, then I would just type in Kansai Ben and get the answer really quickly. And it works very well. Immediately type Kansai Ben, and there is the answer right there. Doya wa doda no imi. And it's Kansai Hyogen. It's the Kansai Ben. So, doda means how is it? So, if we go back to the game, doya means doda. How is it? Doya. Kando shita yaro. So, kando suru is to kind of be emotionally moved by something, right? You're touched, you're moved. So, kando shita means, oh, you were quite, moved by it. Yaro. And yaro is daro. You may have been able to guess that. The da means ya in Kansai dialect. So daro, desho, daro, in Kansai dialect is yaro. It may sound really confusing and complicated, especially if you're a beginner, but you do actually get used to it pretty quickly. I live in Kansai region, and you do get used to it fairly quickly. And also, if you watch TV, most comedians speak in the Kansai dialect as well, because it's kind of a funny sounding. It's actually the kind of birthplace of Japanese comedy, the Osaka area, so it's kind of very famous for that. And that's why most comedians actually speak in this dialect. If you're really having trouble with the Kansai dialect, I highly recommend checking out my Kansai Ben video that I made that covers the most essential pieces of Kansai Ben you need to know in order to understand the Kansai dialect.
De, 感動したよ。
All right, are we getting in? Yeah, we finally have our first battle.
魔物や。
どうするの？
さっきのイノシカとはちゃうで。見てみ。
Okay, so Mamono here is the monster. That's the name for a monster. And so this is a monster, as we can see. And Saki no Inoshika to wa chao de mite mi. So Saki means just earlier. Inoshika is those boar deers. To wa, so as for with those boar deers. Chao de. Now, chao is the Kansai dialect way of saying chigao. So if you want to say, chigao, chigao. Right? That's not it. That's wrong. Well, in Kansai Ben, you would say, chao de, chao. So chao is chigao. De is yo. So chigao yo, chao de, same meaning. And then mite mi. So miru is to look. And then this mi is actually from mite miru, to try and do. So he's kind of saying, look, have a look, mite mi.
さっきのイノシカとはちゃうで。見てみ。襲ってくる気満々や。
逃げなきゃ。
せや、棒持ってるやろ。そいつで叩いて追い払うんや。はよ構えや、来るで。
Okay, so let's fight this monster and have our first battle in Ni No Kuni.
負けないよ。
Now, the nice thing about this game is you can actually take the battle at your own pace. It's very much like a turn-based kind of game. So we have Tatakao, we even have Shizuku, you know, explaining all of the game menus and everything here with furigana, so that makes it very, very accessible. For example, Mazu wa koko. So mazu wa means as for first thing, koko is here, so we can see the arrow pointing to what he's talking about. Midori no geiji ya. So midori means green, geiji is a gauge, and then ya is da. So it's the green gauge. Kore wa, as for this, HP, hito pointo, so the hit points, teiyun ya. So teiyun ya is actually the same as teiyun da. Remember, the ya is da. So this is telling you what this green bar is called. It's called HP. All right, let's skip through this. We have a lot of dialogue that actually has kind of teaching you about things to do with the game. Don't want to bore you guys too much. We kind of get into the story a little bit more. But it's quite nice, right? Being able to see this language really accessible. Thanks to having the furigana and, you know, the gameplay and taking your own pace, it really is nice being able to do this. Most games, like for example, Pokemon, the language that appears during a battle just flies by so quickly that you cannot take it at your own pace. It's impossible, which is really annoying sometimes because you're like, whoa, what happened? What happened? It actually took me years of playing Pokemon before I actually learnt what a critical hit was in Japanese, because it just flew by so quickly in the dialogue. But as you can see, like, I am having difficulty actually pressing the pause button at the right time in order to pause for the dialogue so we can break it down, which this shows that, you know, the cutscenes can be a bit challenging for complete beginners. So you can either have one of two approaches. You can either record your gameplay and then watch the footage later, or you could try what I'm doing and actually press pause at the right time. However, it really does get quite annoying. As you see, when I miss a piece of dialogue, it's really quite frustrating, especially when you're trying to make a video. So I would probably recommend either recording your footage or just kind of watching it like a movie. And that way, you know, it's okay if, you know, things go over your head, because you're going to learn a lot of language when you're playing the game anyway. Recording is always a good thing though, because then you can go back through it. So here, Oliver says, bikkuri shita. So bikkuri suru means to be surprised about something, and then shita is the past tense form. So I was shocked, I was surprised.
Bikkuri shita.
Seya, soda. It's quite difficult, no matter what level your Japanese is, because Shizuku talks in this Osaka dialect. It really can get difficult to understand, and that's why it's a difficult thing to kind of, you know, teach yourself, to trick yourself into being okay with. But I actually really do recommend not worrying too much about what he says. Sometimes it is really important, right? He's teaching things about the story, but it's really going to cause you a huge headache to break everything down that he's saying, just because of how difficult it is to actually look things up in Japanese. He's so difficult that it would even be worth me making a series just on Shizuku and just covering everything that he says, and just so you can learn, you know, the difficulty of how he talks. It isn't easy. So don't feel too bad about being like, what is he talking about? If you check out that Kansai Ben video though, it will definitely give you a good upper hand in actually approaching Shizuku and how he talks. Okay, finally, we are now in the game. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be breaking down most of the main story language that we come across, because we're finally in the actual game. So here Shizuku says, Doya oriba. Doya is doda. So how is it, Oliver? Kore ga, this is what is, Ni no Kuni no daichi ya. So daichi actually means a great land. It's kind of like a huge expanse. As you can see, right, the huge land we can see all the way in the distance. This is the daichi. So ya means da, it is. This is, kore ga, Ni no Kuni no daichi ya. This is the great land of Ni no Kuni. Utsukushii yaro. Utsukushii means beautiful, and then yaro means daro, desho, right? So it's beautiful, right? Goroneru okoku o mezaso. So Goroneru okoku is Goroneru kingdom, or we're doing something to the kingdom, mezaso. Let's aim for the kingdom. And as we can see, it's that beautiful castle down there. So let's head down there. Oh man, the music is so nice. So beautiful. Okay, let's go into the Kingdom of Goroneru. Okay, so we've arrived at the kingdom. However, the gates closed and the guard seems to be in a kind of weird state. And Shizuku says, どうやら門番は抜け殻人になっとるようやな. So, どうやら is like it appears in some way or another. Monban is the person in charge of guarding the gates. So kind of, the gate guard. Monban wa, as for the guard who's, controlling the gates, nuke gara bito ni nattoru. So nuke gara bito. Nuke gara means kind of an empty shell. Nukeru is kind of be empty. Gara is like a husk, a shell. So nuke gara is an empty shell. Bito is actually hito for a person. So a kind of husk, a person who's an empty shell. That is nuke gara bito. So nuke gara bito ni nattoru. Nattoru is like natteiru, but it's the kansai ben. And then your ya is the same as your da. It appears to be the case. So it appears that the Monban has turned into a nuke gara bito. The guard has turned into this empty shell.
どうやら門番は抜け殻人になっとるようやな。
抜け殻人。前にも言ってたやつだね。
前にも言ってたやつだね. So we skipped over this dialogue before because it's a very big intro and I wanted to get into the game. But 前にも, 前 means previously, にも means also. 言ってた, you said, やつ. So the thing or the person that you said previously.
前にも言ってたやつだね。
せや。
せや、そうだ、そうです。
せや。抜け殻人っちゅうのは心の一部を奪われた者たちのことや。
抜け殻人ちゅうのは So this ちゅう is という。というちゅう. You can see there's almost like a slangness to it, right? ちゅうのはというのは. So we're now defining what a 抜け殻人 is. That's what this ちゅうのはというのは means. 心の一部. So 心 is one's heart, and then ichibu is like one part of the heart. Ichi is like one, and then bu is like portion or part. So one part of their heart を奪われた者たちのことや. So 奪う is to steal, to snatch away, but it's in the passive form. 奪われた. It was stolen. Mono is the people, right? We already know that. So the people who had a part of their heart stolen, no koto ya. So no koto is describing what nuke gara bito means, right? So nuke gara bito toyu no wa, what a nuke gara bito is a person who's had a part of their heart stolen. Kokoro no ichibu o ubawareta mono tachi no koto ya.
抜け殻人っちゅうのは心の一部を奪われた者たちのことや。心の一部を失うと人としての本来の機能を果たさんようになる。心の一部を失うと人としての本来の機能を果たさんようになる。So, 心の一部, a part of their heart, or 失う means to lose. So, to lose a part of your heart. And then when we see this to particle following a verb, it often means when you do that verb, or when that verb happens, the following thing occurs. So, 心の一部を失うと when you lose a part of your heart, 人として hito means person, として is like as. So, as a person, の本来の機能, 本来 is like your original, right, the very beginnings. No kino is like your functions. So your very core functions. O hatasan. So this is the same as hatasanai. So again, Kansai dialect turning the nai into So hatasu is actually to kind of achieve, right, to be able to make use of, your functions, right? But hatasanai means you can't. So your ni naru is to become a certain way. So when you lose a part of your heart, you lose the ability, to even function as a human being. 心の一部を失うと人としての本来の機能を果たさんようになる。
誰に奪われたの？
誰に奪われたの? So 誰 who ni by 奪われた was stolen, and then the no is like a soft question particle. This is exactly the same as ka. It's just if he said, for example, dare ni ubawareta ka, it'd be very, very strong, right? Really forceful sentence when you put this just ka at the end of a sentence. It's very forceful. So to make it softer, here Oliver has used no instead, the soft question particle. So, dare ni ubawareta no? Who was it stolen by?
誰に奪われたの？
決まっとるやろ、ジャボーにや。
Kimatoru yaro, jabo ni ya. So, kimatoru is the same as kimateiru. So, it is decided, right? So, it's obvious. Yaro, desho. So, it's obvious, right? Jabo ni ya. So, Jabo is kind of the bad guy of this world that Shizuku was explaining before.
決まっとるやろ、ジャボーにや。ジャボーは自分に歯向かうものとか。
Jabo wa jibun ni hamukao mono toka. So, Jabo wa, as for Jabo, jibun ni to oneself. Hamukao, ha is your teeth, and then mukao is to kind of face. So, to face your teeth at someone. But what it means is actually to kind of confront, to object, to go against, right? Hamukao mono toka. So, toka is like things like. So, things like people who, defy to go against him.
ジャボーは自分に歯向かうものとか、自分にとって危険なものたちを。
自分にとって危険なものたちを。So, 自分にとって、so 自分 oneself にとって regarding or for oneself. 危険なもの, that means dangerous people. 危険 is dangerous and then mono is people. So, dangerous people, mono tachi, that's the plural of lots of people. 危険なものたちを. So, something is being done to people who are dangerous.
自分にとって危険なものたちを次々抜け殻人にして戦う力を奪っていったんや。
次々に抜け殻人にして戦う力を奪っていたんや。So, 次々に means kind of in succession. 次 actually means next. So, the next and the next and the next, right? In succession. 次々に抜け殻人にして。So, ni suru actually means to make or to decide something to be a certain way. So here, to make someone a nuke garabito ni shite, it's in the te form because it's kind of like a comma to the sentence. The sentence isn't finished. Tatakao chikara. Tatakao means to fight, and then chikara is your strength, your power. So, your power to fight. Tatakao chikara o. So we're doing something to that strength to fight. Ubatte tanya. So ubao is to steal, and it's in the past tense form. So he stole, ubatte da, and then finally da, or here in Kansai Ben, nya. So it is that. So he's explaining something. So everyone that was kind of, a threat to him, he turned them all into nuke garabito and stole their power to fight back.
次々抜け殻人にして戦う力を奪っていったんや。
でもこのままじゃゴロネール王国に入れないよ。
でもこのままじゃゴロネール王国に入れないよ。So, demo, however, このまま is just like this. Whenever I think of this word, I think of Neo Automata. このままじゃダメ。Right, if it continues on like this, このままじゃゴロネール王国に so to the kingdom of Goroneru 入れないよ。Here 入れる is to be able to enter in. 入れない means you can't enter in. So if it continues like this, we won't be able to get into the kingdom.
でもこのままじゃゴロネール王国に入れないよ。
Okay, and now we're back to non-voice dialogue. And this is going to be much more approachable for you because you can just take it at your own pace. But we'll just skip through some of this because it's not voiced and it's not necessarily super interesting and it's just kind of long. But pretty much what he's saying is that we need to find this choro. So as we can see in our objectives, choro ni ao tame. So in order to meet the elder, that's choro, right? Kita no mori e iko. Kita means north, mori is a forest, and then e shows the direction to the north forest, iko. Let's go. So let's go to the north forest to meet with the Choro, who can hopefully fix this problem that's going on with these guys who are blocking the way. So this area is really cool because we get to kind of showcase the beauty of Ni No Kuni. It really is so beautiful. You can actually see the monsters walking around in the background, which is another really cool thing that's better than Pokemon, is where, you know, you had the random battles for so long. Not nowadays, but, you know, oh, that's kind of cute. A little Pingu kind of thing. But it's cool, like, to be able to see the actual not Pokemon, see the actual monsters, like, kind of, you know, walking around, and you can kind of avoid them and things like that. It's quite nice. The battles are quite simple. It is kind of actually like Pokemon. You actually do eventually get the ability to kind of have your own Pokemon to help you in your battles, as you're kind of like a caster. You have, you know, like magic and stuff like that, but that will be in a little bit. Right now, I just want to avoid most of these guys so I don't have to fight them all, and head to the star on the map, which is the Kita no Mori, the northern forest, which is a really beautiful location. Oh, cool. Can we pause? Oh, excellent. We can pause this as well. That's something you can't do in a Pokemon game. So we can actually see at the very top it says, Mamono kara no sensei kougeki. So Mamono kara is from the monsters, and then no is kind of a possessive particle. So the thing of from the monsters. And then we have sensei kougeki. So this is actually kind of like a preemptive attack. Here, the sensei kougeki. Kougeki means the attack, and this sensei part here is like a preemptive. So it's a preemptive attack from the monsters because they snuck up behind me as I was trying to run away, right? Ah, so he's gonna hurt me. No, please don't hurt me. Honestly, I would say, like, this game would be a highly recommended game for beginners if you just could delete Shizuku from the game. I love him, he's great, but he makes things hard. Oh, it's so beautiful though. There's those same birds again. Oh, mite mi, Monyu ya. So, hey, have a look. It is a Monyu. Monyu? 大昔からある不思議な石や、この石に触れたらセーブすることができるで。So, 大昔 is like a great long time ago. Kara is from, aru is to exist. So it has existed for a long time. 不思議な石や. Fushigina means kind of mysterious, and then ishi is a stone. So that stone that we can see, that mysterious stone that we can see in the background, Fushigina ishi, yada. It is a certain mysterious stone from a very long time ago. Kono ishi ni furetara. So kono ishi, this stone, fureru is to touch, and then furetara is if or when you touch it. セーブすることができるで。So, セーブする to save. ことができる means you're able to do. And then de is your in the Kansai dialect. So, if you touch or when you touch this stone, you'll be able to save. 森や洞窟みたいなダンジョンではどこでもセーブできるわけやないからな。So, 森 is forest, ya and Dokutsu is a really common fantasy word that you probably won't come across outside of fantasy games as often, but this means a cave or a cavern. Mitaina, so like, things like forests and caves. Dungeon dewa, dungeon is dungeon. Dewa, as for at dungeons. Doko demo, anywhere. Seivu dekiru, to be able to save. Wake ya nai. And this is the same as wake dewa nai, wake janai, wake yanai, right? So it's not the case that you can just save anywhere when you're in a dungeon like forests and caves. Nande? Huh? Why? Oi, oi, dungeon chu no wa ne, mamono ga uyoyo shitennen de. So, oi, oi, it's like, hey, come on. Dungeon chu no wa, so dungeon toyu no wa, the thing that is a dungeon. Mamono ga, monsters are doing uyoyo shiteru. So here, uyoyo suru is to kind of, be covered in, to kind of crawl all about. And then here we actually have shitennen. So this is very similar to shiteiru. Check out my Kansai Ben video if you want to learn how the ne is used. And then de here is yo. So, hey, come on, dungeons are places where monsters are all crawling about. Mamono ga uyoyo? Abunai yo. What? That's dangerous. Okay, so let's skip a bit of that. We've learned how to save, so I'll just quickly save. I love so much how there's furigana everywhere. Okay, and now let's follow Shizuku to the Chodo. I believe in Dragon Ball, Guru, like the elder guru, was also called Chodo-sama. So that's kind of that kind of figure, right? Wait up, Shizuku.
Nanda, omae-tachi wa?
Nanda, what is it? Omae-tachi wa, as for you guys.
Nanda, omae-tachi wa?
何これ
Nani kore? What's this? Oh, yeah, we can see a cute little tree face.
何これ
これが古の木や。
Kore ga inishie no kiya. So this is the ancient tree. So initiate is ancient. This is a very high level. I think it's N1 piece of language to mean ancient. I think we've already seen this in The Legend of Zelda, which we already said was one of the hardest games so far that we've covered. And then ki is a tree, and then ya is da. So this is the ancient tree. Kore ga inishie no ki ya.
これが古の木や。久しぶりでんな、旦那。
Hisashiburi de na danna. So hisashiburi means it's been a long time. And then we have danna. This is funny because this is actually the word for a husband in Japanese. However, as we can see, it can also be talking about a master. So it doesn't have to be husband. You can see the relationship there, in the kind of olden day, very sexist world view, but, the master of the house being the husband in the olden days. Well, that's kind of the relation here that danna has. There is some more meanings as well. If we highlight over it, we can see it means sir, boss, master, person of a high status, a sugar daddy. So there's lots of uses here of danna. So, it's been a long time, huh, boss?
久しぶりでんな、旦那。
雫か。わしに何の用だ?
Washi ni nan no yoda. So washi is like an old man way of watashi, and then washi ni, so to or with me, nan no yoda. So nan is like what kind, nan no what kind of, and then yo is actually like business, right? So what kind of business do you have with me? Washi ni nan no yoda.
雫か。わしに何の用だ?
いや、一の国から客人が来ましてね。
Yeah. Ichi no kuni kara kyakujin ga kimashita ne. So, yeah. It's like, no. And this is actually really interesting. We can actually see the real world being referred to as Ichi no Kuni. So if you remember, the name of this game is Ni No Kuni, the second world, and our world, right, the real world, here is being referred to as Ichi no Kuni, the first world, right? So, Ichi no Kuni kara, from the first world, kyakujin ga kimashite ne. And then kyakujin here is like a visitor. So a visitor is the one who's doing an action. Kimashite, the same as kimashita, they came. So, no. Yeah. Actually, a visitor from the first world has come.
いや、一の国から客人が来ましてね。ほんでもって旦那にいろいろとお力を貸していただきたいと。
Then we have hondemotte. So hondemotte is the Kansai way of saying sondemotte, which means and then or and that is kind of in addition. Danna ni, so with the boss, iroiro to, so iroiro means various, or chikara, power, or kashite itadakitai to. And so kasu actually means to lend, so he's asking, right, will you lend me things like your power? Te itadaku is to receive, and then itadakitai means you want to receive. So I thought that I'd like to receive, some of your power or, help in various ways.
ほんでもって旦那にいろいろとお力を貸していただきたいと。
お前はいつも困った時にだけやってくる。
お前はいつも困った時にだけやってくる. So already, my God, it's so much more easier when Shizuku's not talking, when you're reading a character that's not Shizuku. And I understand how that could be a bit of a put off for some people. Omae wa, as for you, itsumo, always, komatta toki, komaru is to be in trouble, toki is time, so when you're troubled, komatta toki ni, so at those times, dake, only yatte kuru, you come. So you only come here when you're in trouble.
お前はいつも困った時にだけやってくる。全く調子のいいやつだ。
全く調子のいいやつだ. So 全く means completely, and then 調子のいいやつ can actually be kind of referring to someone in a good condition, but here it's more referring to him being like a smooth talker, right? 調子のいい can mean that as well. Yatsu is a guy, so you're completely, a smooth talker.
全く調子のいいやつだ。
すんません。旦那にはいつも感謝してます。
すんません。旦那にはいつも感謝しています. So, すんません is the same as すみません. As you'll see, right, a lot of times in Kansai dialect, the verbs and words and stuff are kind of conjugated or kind of pushed down. So here the mi for すみません, the すんません, すみません, すんません. Right, it's kind of like this push down of language. It's almost what happens in Australian speech, actually, when you have this kind of casual, colloquial way of speaking, and that's often what you'll see here with Kansai Ben. So, sunmasen is the same as sumimasen. Danna ni, so with the boss, itsumo, always kansha shiteimasu. So I'm very kind of thankful and gracious for everything.
すんません。旦那にはいつも感謝してます。
しかしその子は。
しかし。その子は So, however, that child, as for that child.
しかしその子は。
長老もお気づきになられましたか。
長老もお気づきになられましたか? So, 長老も also, the elder, and kizuku actually means to notice something. And here Shizuku is actually talking in kind of keigo speech, very, very polite. All of a sudden he's saying, did you notice? お気づきになられましたか? So this is just a very keigo way of saying, did you notice? Kind of like 気づいた, did you notice? But this is very, very formal. So did you also notice? So have you also noticed, 長老?
長老もお気づきになられましたか。
透き通った心の持ち主か。
透き通った心の持ち主か. So 透き通った is kind of like clear, pure in a sense. Kokoro is heart, no mochinushi. Motsu is to hold or to possess, and then mochinushi is actually kind of like the owner of something, the person who possesses something. So, the person who possesses a clear, pure heart.
透き通った心の持ち主か。透き通った心は闇を打ち払う。
透き通った心は闇を打ち払う. So, 透き通った心, so the heart that is pure, as for the heart that's pure, yami is darkness. And then yami or uchi harao, this means to kind of fight off the darkness. Yami o uchi harao.
透き通った心は闇を打ち払う。雫、まさかお前。
はい。
So, he's realizing, whoa. Really? No way. You? And then he says, yes.
まさかお前。
俺たち、ジャボーと戦いますわ。
俺たち、ジャボーと戦いますわ. So, 俺たち, we, Jabo, the bad guy, to, with the bad guy, 戦います. We will fight. And then wa here, this is a tricky piece of language because you'll often see in textbooks that it's the feminine sentence ending particle to add emphasis, a very feminine sounding ending of a sentence. However, in Kansai Ben, in the Kansai region, it's totally normal to use to add to the end of the sentence to add emphasis, no matter what your gender is. You don't have to be male or female. You can be absolutely anyone. So here in the Kansai region, everyone can use this wa particle. So here, 戦いますわ is like being very emphatic. We're gonna fight him.
俺たち、ジャボーと戦いますわ。
なんと。
なんと It's like, what?
なんと。相変わらずバカなやつじゃ。
Aikawarazu means as always, right? And they're never changing, as always. Baka na yatsu. Baka means stupid. Yatsu is a guy. So baka na yatsu is a stupid guy. Ja is da. So it's an old man way of speaking. So as always, you're an idiot.
相変わらずバカなやつじゃ。よかろう。力を貸してやろう。
よかろう。 very well. Chikara o kashite yaro. So chikara is power, and then kasu is to lend. So te yaru is give to someone. So very well, I will lend you my power.
よかろう、力を貸してやろう。しかし、その前にその子のイマージェンをどうにかせねばならんな。
しかし、however, その前に before that, その子のイマージェンをどうにかせねばならんな。So, しかし, however, その前に before that, その子, that child's, の Imagen. So, Imagen is actually the name of the kind of Pokemon that I mentioned before that you can actually catch. So, we'll see that now. Oh, so doing something to the Imagen. どうにか, somehow, せねばならん. So this is the same as shinaito ikenai, but it's just kind of more of an archaic old way of speaking. So we have to do something about this kid's Imagen.
しかし、その前にその子のイマージェンをどうにかせねばならんな。
お、せや、確かに忘れるとこでした。
お、そうや、確かに忘れるところでした。So, oh is like, oh, soya is the same as so desu ne, soda, right? Soya, soda. You could also say seiya, right? We've seen him use that as well. Soya, that's right. Tashikani, certainly, wasureru toko deshita. So this is the same as wasureru tokoro deshita, but it's just colloquial. It's been kind of shortened. So toko is the same as tokoro. And here, it actually means that you're about to do this action. Check out this video right here to learn how tokoro with verbs can actually be that you're about to do that action. But here, wasureru tokoro deshita means I was just on the verge, I was just about to, I was just on the point of forgetting.
お、せや、確かに忘れるとこでした。
Okay, so let's just skip this a little bit so we can get a little bit further in. So we're going to learn how to catch an Imagen. Okay, so Shizuku just told us to open our books so we can write in the magic in order to summon, right, an Imagen. Oh, beautiful. We got those wonderful Ghibli cutscenes. And we got the next page. So that's kind of like what happens as you play the game. You unlock more and more pages whenever you come across like a monster and sometimes high level items and things like that and places. So you can like constantly get more and more reading practice as you play the game. I so hope that the next Pokemon game has Furigana in the Pokedex. It is, imagine if there was a Pokedex like this. Oh my god, that would be perfect. Please, Pokemon, please put Furigana in your Pokedex. So here we have Imagen no peiji o te ni ireta. So Imagen is the Pokemon that we're going to be meeting. Peiji, so page about them, o te ni ireta. And te ni ireru is to obtain something. Te ni ireta is the past tense form. You obtained a page about Imagens. Chodo-sama, arigatou gozaimasu. So thank you very much, Elder. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to actually use the magic in order to summon it. In the actual DS version, you actually had to hand write every single time when you wanted to do the spell. And if you didn't know how to write the spell, that was it. You couldn't do it. That's why you needed the book. Luckily, this game actually has the book, you know, as a part of the actual game, so you don't have to do it that way. But it's cool. Like even here, look, Furigana for everything, like descriptions of everything. It's so accessible, my god. So let's do Imagen. And as we can see in the description, it says, Kokoro no senshi, Imagen o yobidasu maho. So Kokoro no senshi, Kokoro is heart, senshi is a warrior. So a warrior of your heart, Imagen. Imagen is a warrior of your heart. O yobidasu maho. So yobidasu is to call out, and then maho is a magic. So it's a magic that calls out Imagens, who are warriors of your heart. Karera wa, as for them, kokorozioi mikata to naru. So kokorozioi is like very strong, reliable, right? Kokoro is like heart, zioi is strong. Kokorozioi is like very, very dependable and strong. Mikata is an ally, to naru, they become. So they will become very strong allies. So let's use that magic and summon our first Imagen.
これは
なかなか筋がええぞ。 これがお前の心の戦士、イマージェン。
So the next line that he says is これがお前の心の戦士、イマージェンや。So we already learnt that language with this description. これが as for this お前の your heart's soldier, 心の戦士、イマージェンや。It is イマージェンだ。
これがお前の心の戦士、イマージェン。
心の戦士
心の戦士 The warrior of your heart.
心の戦士
そうや。
そうや、そうだ。That's right.
そうや。お前の心の強さが実体化して戦士の姿になったんや。
お前の心の強さが実体化して戦士の姿になったんや。So お前の心の強さ。So 強さ is the next new word that we've learned here. This actually means the strength. So you can actually turn adjectives 強い into nouns 強さ by simply dropping the last e in the e adjective 強い、強 and then adding sa. So 強い、強さ. That turns strong into strength, an adjective into a noun. So お前の心の強さ so the strength of your heart が実体化して and this actually means to kind of get a physical form, right? 実体 is like a real form, and then ka is kind of the process of making, the process of becoming, the process of changing into. So the materialization of the strength of your heart. 戦士の姿になったんや. So sugata is like the appearance, the shape, the form of a soldier, the form of a warrior. Ni natanda. Ni natanya. He has become.
お前の心の強さが実体化して戦士の姿になったんや。
Yeah, he's
これで本当に戦えるの
I love the scene, man. Oh, it's so Ghibli.
見てなんだよこいつ
はあ、お前の心が強なったらこいつも強なってくるんや。
お前の心が強なったら So if or when your heart becomes strong こいつも強なってくるんや So he will also become strong. And this is another piece of Kansai dialect that we can see. Here we can see an e adjective with ni naru to become. So 強くなる. However, in Kansai Ben, rather than 強くなる, it's 強うなる. So the ku sound for e adjectives becomes an u sound. 強くなったら 強なったら. Kansai dialect Osaka Ben is very complicated and difficult. However, if you ever wanted a challenge to learn Kansai dialect, Shizuku is the man for you.
Wow.
Okay, so we've got our first Pokemon, these cute little soldier guy. One thing that does annoy me a little bit about this game is that it mostly has voice acting in the cutscenes, and then not so much voice acting in the language that is actually accessible. Now, you might not necessarily care about, having voice acting in all of these sections of the game, right? And that's fine, because this is a huge, easy reading practice thanks to having the furigana. But just for me personally, I just wish there was more voice acting.
なんや？
Not like this, where it's just flying by, right? Because it makes it really difficult to approach as a language learner. Like, I'm sure you're probably already bothered by me having to press the pause button to break it all down, right? So it does show that it is a difficult game in that way, but it also is an incredibly easy game in other ways. All right, let's have our first battle. Little cutie. So let's make fight our Imagine and fight these guys. So we're having a whole bunch of text here about reading about the health bars and everything. So it's very accessible because you can learn all of the instructions about how to play and all of these explanations. There's so much language for you as a language learner. Too much for me to break down in this video, but definitely useful for you as a language learner. So we have this move here that costs 10 MP. And even the move has furigana. Like, how cool is that? But God, just one battle, that amount of dialogue would be like one whole video just trying to cover every bit of dialogue in this battle. But it's definitely great for a language learner. There is definitely a lot of dialogue in this game, right? I'm having to skip so much just to make this video not too ridiculously overwhelming. It's crazy how much dialogue there is. But look how cool this is. Like, even the stats have furigana on them. As we can see just above, right? We have chikara just above, and waza, yosa, mamori, tafusa, subayasa, and even visually it's pretty clear what they're talking about, right? So I really love how accessible this game is, even if it certainly has its downsides. The fact that there's so much furigana really does make it just so accessible. I think the major downsides to this game is that the voice scenes are all incredibly inaccessible, like a lot of cutscene games are, because you have to keep pausing over and over, which means you don't get to hear the voice acting anyway. It's really quite frustrating. So realistically, you'd be better off recording the game and actually going through your footage later. And then the game text that is approachable, unfortunately, isn't as voice acted. So for me, it's not necessarily my favorite game for learning Japanese with, but it could definitely be someone's ideal first RPG type game, right? Just because of how accessible it is. I can definitely see the appeal. Like, it's so charming with the Ghibli and everything. It's incredible. It's so cool. The music and everything. And there's so much dialogue. If you finish this game by yourself and you read every line of dialogue, every single instruction, my God, that is quite a lot of reading practice that you will have had. And useful reading practice, right? A lot of this language is incredibly applicable for almost any RPG. Oh, I love that. Oh, hello! Jesus, just getting attacked. Can't even talk. A lot of the language that you're going to learn will be applicable to both Pokemon games, Final Fantasy games, Dragon Quest games, any kind of fantasy RPG, really. A lot of this you could be learning the fundamental language for any of these genres. So if you're interested in playing games in Japanese, this could be a really good first game. I would personally recommend ignoring Shizuku, which sometimes is a good suggestion, sometimes it sucks because he's actually saying things that are critical to the story. But if you were to go through this as a beginner, trying to not only take all of the Japanese that you're, surrounded by, and then add on top of it the difficulty of having to learn a completely different dialect, I think that would be asking too much. And so that's why, for a beginner, even for an intermediate, I would recommend maybe just not caring too much about Shizuku. Although that being said though, because this is such a popular game, I really do feel like I should make a Shizuku video to kind of help you. Because if you can get past the Shizuku barrier for this game, then it's a very accessible game. Although realistically, I would probably put Dragon Quest XI higher than Ni No Kuni, with all things considered. Like, even just look at this, like, even just the inventory, being able to read about chocolate, right? Totemo amai chocoreto. Amai mono no sukina jose ni daininki. Like, that's great. Like, that's such a nice little short burst of reading practice where you just get a little bit of a description about what chocolate is. Totemo, very, amai, sweet, chocoreto, chocolate. Amai mono no sukina jose, so amai mono, sweet things. Ski means to like, and here sukina jose is girl, so a girl or a female or a woman or just female, right? A female who likes sweet things. Daininki. It's very, very popular. So that's really nice where you can just get this short burst of language. The only downside is that the game itself has a lot of language that you need to go through as you play. It does ease up as you get a little bit further into the game, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to constantly be so story focused like we currently are, because you do kind of focus more on like collecting Pokemon and exploring the world and kind of going through dungeons and stuff like that. So it does certainly ease up on how much language that you have to go through. However, in the beginning, there is definitely a lot of dialogue to get through before you get to that stage. Unlike, for example, a Pokemon game, which has like immediate balance between the gameplay and story ratio, right? Pokemon games, you could spend hours upon hours upon hours of never reading anything, and still enjoying the game. I'm not so sure you could do that with Ni No Kuni, at least until later on in the game when you get a bit further. The beginning is quite story heavy, which is a great thing, but also a potential downside depending on what you're looking for. Another thing you could do though is just play the game at your own pace, and things like these cutscenes that play, you could just watch YouTube videos on later. That's another option. Ooh. Got a big sound. I remember this guy looking pretty cool. Ah, he looks awesome. Ah, it's so Ghibli, isn't it? Whoa, okay, let's pause that because he's awesome, man. So, Kita no mori o osameru seiju, nushi. So, nushi, as we actually have already seen, can be like the owner or the lord, right? So here it's kind of like a lord of the forest, right? Kita no mori, so the northern forest, or osameru is like kind of reign over, to kind of be the ruler of. And then seiju is a mythical beast. We've actually learnt this word in Zelda Breath of the Wild. I believe we've learnt it. It's a very important word for Zelda anyway. And this is a mythical beast, right? There was I think there was like 4 mythical beasts in Zelda. Well, here is a mythical beast, the lord of the northern forest. Okay, so let's help the tree and get rid of this forest guy. So I skipped some of that dialogue, but pretty much the tree wants me to help kind of ease this spirit, because for some reason he's getting really angry. He was fine before, but something's happened to kind of anger him. Oh, we have Horsaw. What is that? Okay, he's screaming. That's not good. Oh no! Please leave me alone! Alright, I almost have my guy back. Let's actually use some fire. We have Fireball if we want. Chisana hi no tama o tobashite teki itai ni hi damage o ataeru. So this is all really useful RPG language. Chisana hi. Chisana means small. Hi is a fire, so a small flame. No tama. Tama is like a bowl. So a bowl of flame. Or tobasu. Tobasu is to send flying. So send flying a ball of flame. Teki itai. Teki is the enemy. Itai is one. So one enemy. Ni, 2. Hi damage, so flame damage, or ataeru, you will give. So send a ball of flame to one enemy and make them have fire damage. That worked. Run! Akan! O waza ga kisou ya. Koko ga gaado suru nya. So akan is the kansai ben of ikan dame, right? It's no good. So it's no good. O waza, that's a huge waza, a huge technique, ga kisou. That means kuru, to come, so appears. So it appears that it's going to be coming. As we can see, he's doing this mori no toppu, which is kind of like a blast of wind. Koko wa, as for here, gaado surunda. So you should guard here. So, alright, let's do that then. I'll guard. Commando ni mamoru toka, mamore toka atta yaro. So here, mamore is to guard, to defend. Sore o erabeba, if you choose that, damage o heraseru de. So herasu is to reduce. So if we choose mamoru or mamore, we can defend. Oh, nice! That was pretty awesome. Okay, we finally got him. So that was our first boss in Ni No Kuni. And it was a little bit challenging. And we have our first little page here. There's a Pokedex of one of the bosses that we've come across. So that's really nice. We've got the Nushi no Peiji, so the Lord of the Forest page. So what's his deal? He just walks off. Okay. Oh, that was pretty dangerous.
おお、よくぞ森の主を元に戻してくれた。
Okay, and so finally we finished this forest area, and the tree says Yokuzo, so that means you've done well. mori no nushi o moto ni modoshite kureta. So mori, the forest, no nushi, the lord of the forest, o, doing something to the lord of the forest, moto ni, to the original state, like moto here can be how it originally was, modoshite kureta. So you returned for me, the te kureru, to do for me. So you returned the lord of the forest for me. You've done very well.
おお、よくぞ森の主を元に戻してくれた。あれもしっかり見つかっておるぞ。
あれもしっかり見つかっておるぞ。So あれ that も also しっかり so doing it properly 見つかっておる so this is the same as 見つかっている so you have found that also
あれもしっかり見つかっておるぞ。その前に礼代わりのプレゼント。
その前に so before that 礼 here is kind of like a thanks or compensation but it's a part of re gawari, so this is the repayment of kind of thanks, no presento, a present ja, it is. So before that, here is a present of my thanks.
その前に礼代わりのプレゼントじゃ。
プレゼント？
おお、感謝です。
わしの親友ロックストーンを預けよう。
Washi no shinyu, so my very close friend, Rockstone, or azukeyo. I will give you my close friend Rockstone. Okay, I'm guessing that's a Pokemon or something.
じゃ。
プレゼント？
おお、感謝です。
わしの親友ロックストーンを預けよう。旅の案内人となってくれるだろう。
Okay, so tabi no annai nin to natte kureru daro. So he's kind of a guide for people who are traveling. Tabi is a travel or a trip. Annai nin, annai is to guide, and then nin is like a person, so a person who does the guiding. So he's a tour guide, right? Tabi no annai nin to natte kureru. So he will become a tour guide for you. Daro, right? I guess. I'm sure. So I'm sure he will become a very, useful guide for you on your travels.
旅の案内人となってくれるだろう。ストーン先生とでも呼んでおけば。
Stone sensei to demo yonde okeba. So Stone sensei is teacher, master Stone. To, so now we're quoting something. Demo even yonde okeba. So if you call.
ストーン先生とでも呼んでおけば機嫌よくいろいろと教えてくれるだろう。
Kigen yoku. So kigen is like in the mood. Yoku is yoi, to be good. So in a good mood. Kigen yoku, in a good mood. Iroiro to, that means in various ways. Oshiete kureru daro. So he will teach you various things. If you do something so nice as call him Stone Sensei. Bit of flattery never hurts.
機嫌よくいろいろと教えてくれるだろう。そしてもう一つがトレビン。お前たちが求めておったものだな。
そしてもう一つがトレビン。What is a トレビン？お前たちが求めておったものだな。Oh, okay, this must be the thing that we're looking for to give back to the guy who lost his heart at the gate.
そしてもう一つがトレビン。お前たちが求めておったものだな。これは人の心のかけらを入れる入れ物じゃ。
これは人の心のかけらを入れる入れ物じゃ。So this is, as for this, これは人の心 human's heart, person's heart のかけら is like a fragment of a person's heart を入れる so to put into 入れ物じゃ it's a container. Oh, okay, so it's a container where you put fragments of people's hearts in. That sounds a lot more suspicious than it actually is meaning to be. It's like, I'm going to collect your fragments of your heart. I don't think that's quite as ominous as that.
これは人の心のかけらを入れる入れ物じゃ。抜け殻人を救うには。
抜け殻人を救うには so 救う is to save, には is in order to, and we know that 抜け殻人 is the kind of the shell, the empty shell people. So in order to save those empty shell people,
抜け殻人を救うにはこのトレビンと心を受け渡す魔法が必要になる。
このトレビンと心を受け渡す魔法が必要になる。So this Trebin and 心を受け渡す魔法, so the magic to kind of transfer, to hand over the heart. So it's 必要になる, it's become necessary, it becomes necessary. So this Trebin and the magic to hand over the heart, it becomes important.
このトレビンと心を受け渡す魔法が必要になる。共に授けようぞ。
共に授けようぞ. So 共に is together, and then 授けよう is I will give. So I will give it together.
共に授けようぞ。
長老様、ありがとうございます。
長老様、ありがとうございます. Thank you very much, Elder.
長老様、ありがとうございます。
Okay, so we've pretty much done everything we need to for the tree. The tree has now helped us get back into the castle that we were trying to get into. And I think this is probably a good time to actually finish the video because the castle is a whole nother chapter. So we have now kind of seen our first area of Ni No Kuni and kind of, you know, what the gameplay is like and kind of how the game actually plays. And pretty much the game is very much like this for the rest of the game, right? You have some cutscenes where you can't really take the language at your own pace. You have to press the pause button, which is a little bit annoying, but at least you can press the pause button. Some games don't even give you that ability. There's not so much voice acting in the actual dialogue between characters. It's mostly unvoiced dialogue that you can take at your own pace, whereas the voice dialogue is kind of more cutscenes and movies. There are, you know, lots of NPCs that you'll come across, especially as we head into the kingdom. There'll be lots of NPCs to talk to and, you know, secrets to unlock and all kinds of places to explore. And it's a very fun, magical world to explore. If you can't already tell, it's got a lot of that Ghibli magic of kind of exploring different places. And it's definitely not just forests and you know, kingdoms. You go to deserts and oceans and dragons and icelands and all kinds of crazy, dark, magical, mystical areas. So it really is a very charming world and amazing art style, really lovely music. And most importantly for a Japanese language learner is just how accessible the language is thanks to the furigana everywhere. And realistically, there aren't too many fantasy games that have this level of accessibility of language. A lot of fantasy games tend to be aimed at more, you know, mature audiences. They don't. Furigana is more aimed at younger audiences, right? Kids. Generally speaking, you know, fantasy games don't have that much furigana. Off the top of my head, I know Dragon Quest is one that always has furigana. Zelda always has furigana, but isn't necessarily quite as, like, you know, heavy in the story. So it is a little bit rare, right, to find a fantasy game that has furigana. Dragon Quest being one of the other ones, the main other ones. And in fact, I would actually highly recommend playing Dragon Quest more than Ni No Kuni, actually, to help you with your Japanese study. Although it's tough though. Like, in some ways, I love Dragon Quest so much more because of the fact that you can take the language at your own pace, even the voiced scenes. But Ni No Kuni has the amazing book that you can go through and read everything with furigana. It's so much more accessible. But then it's not necessarily the most, you know, enthralling language that you're going to be so excited about reading. You know, it still is reading a book, right? It's not necessarily the language in the game. But I personally really love those kind of Pokédex things. And so, hey, if it's something that appeals to you, then Ni No Kuni could definitely be a great game for you. There is just the Kansai dialect guide that, as you can see, makes things quite difficult, even for looking things up if you're not aware of what it is. Looking it up on the dictionary can get quite difficult. But if you do want to challenge taking on this game, then I would highly recommend doing my trick that I showed you, is just simply typing in, right, the word or the phrase that you're not sure of, and maybe like Kansai Ben Imi. And if it pops up, it probably is Kansai Ben, or just get rid of the kansai ben part and just do imi, and that can help as well if, for example, your dictionaries aren't coming up with anything. So I think that's a great place to stop it. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and having a look at what Ni No Kuni is like to learn Japanese with. It's very accessible thanks to the furigana, but there are challenges because of the cutscenes. You can't take your own pace, and Shizuku is a nightmare. Although very enjoyable and interesting to learn from if you're interested in learning Osaka dialect. But I understand that's definitely an advanced thing to do. First, you got to learn standard Japanese before you try and, jump deep in. It is quite challenging. However, for example, if you're looking at living in the Kansai region like I was, for example, this was actually more important than learning how most people talk in Tokyo, because I'm not really interested in living there. However, I'm sure that's not going to apply to most of you. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out the spreadsheet of all of the language that we've covered, feel free to check that in the link down below. If you like this kind of video and want to support the channel, then please like, subscribe, and if you really love this kind of content, then consider joining us on Patreon and come joining us in the Game Gengo Discord, where we all help each other learn Japanese, have fun, geek out, make lots of friends, and just enjoy the journey of learning Japanese, as that's really the core message that I'm really trying to achieve here with Game Gengo. Is yes, I'm wanting to make a place that's very useful in your Japanese studies, but the most important thing that I'm really trying to accomplish with Game Gengo is trying to make language learning fun. Really trying to get away from the efficient and sterile learning environment that a lot of people can go down when they're really hyper-focused on things like the JLPT, passing exams and tests. But learning language is a huge world beyond just studying for tests, and I really hope that Game Gengo can help people kind of just enjoy learning Japanese and kind of just normalize not needing to, completely know absolutely everything all the time. It's okay to not know something. The fun is in finding what it is and, enjoying the process, not being so hard on yourself. So thanks so much, guys, for watching, and as always, I'll see you all again in the next video. See ya.